Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be reacting to
Why Europe failed to dominate tech.
Welcome to another episode of Cold Fusion. Here's a question. How do you measure who's really shaping the digital world? One way to world are American. When you really think about around free. Basically, how many consumer-facing European tech companies can you name off the top of your head?
Oh, my bad. I skipped because I thought it was an ad, Oh, how do you determine this? Use this app, whatever, it's not.
Shaping the digital world. One way to look at it is where people spend their time online. Here's a list of the 20 most visited websites in the world. You'll notice, aside from these two, Yandex from Russia and Naver from South Korea, nearly all of them are American. But do you notice something else? There isn't a single European company on this list. But when you really think about it, these companies are a part of everyday life. Maybe you use Google to search for things, or Google Maps to get around, FaceTime or WhatsApp to message a friend, or you might scroll through Instagram or TikTok while waiting for your Amazon delivery. Basically, you're interacting with a world
Well, TikTok is not American.
created almost entirely outside of Europe. It isn't that surprising though.
Outside
How
of
many
Europe,
consumer-facing European tech companies can you name off the top of your head? Not many, I'd guess. But the thing is, it wasn't always like this. Europeans largely led the tech world before Silicon Valley. Before the Mark Zuckerbergs and Jeff Bezos, there was Nokia, Siemens, and Ericsson. Not to mention early pioneers like Alan Turing,
Yeah, the phone companies, yeah.
Conrad Zuse, and Tim Berners-Lee, who all, by no exaggeration, laid the groundwork for modern computing and the internet itself. But things have clearly changed now. Europe no longer sits at the table. It's not just one country that we're talking about here. It's a whole continent with 27 nations and 450 million people in it. It's
What
also
about
home to some of
Spotify?
the world's best universities
Spotify.
Yes, let's not forget Spotify, that's European.
and has a rich history of scientific breakthroughs. Yet the European Union has not
Spotify.
I guess it didn't fit into his narrative, so to speak. He's showing websites. Spotify is an app. So,
He did show apps. TikTok.
no, but in that list, it was websites. It would be interesting now that you brought Spotify, to see the European apps. Because websites is kind of a thing of a past now. Now we're on to apps. So, off the top of my head, yes, Spotify, but also Angry Birds was European. Angry Birds was a big deal at
They
one
cut
point.
that out immediately.
Yeah, people got tired of it. It's repetitive. I think Angry Birds was Finnish. Yeah. I don't recall any others now.
produced a single global tech company on the scale of Apple, Google, Microsoft, or Tencent. Why is that? How did a continent that helped shape the modern world fall behind in the digital world? But that's not to say the EU is doing nothing. The EU is still managing to shape the tech world.
This is so
Let's take a
pretty.
look.
Look how this street is.
You are watching Cold Fusion TV.
Before we start, I just want to say thanks for all the love. What are some signs that a society
I think it's the regulations, probably. It seems like, when the other guy, when we do his reactions, he's really onto European regulations and that they're kind of stifling the growth of tech in Europe.
or region is doing well? Not just economically, but more broadly. You can look at industrial strength, education quality, or how well people live. Some of these are easy to quantify. Others, though, are more subtle, like how open or forward-thinking a society is. By most of those measures, Europe is doing more than fine. In fact, in many areas it's leading. So when we say Europe is falling behind, we're only talking about a specific sector, consumer technology, because Europe ticks almost every box that should make it a tech powerhouse. For instance, it has a history of industrial precision and world-class engineering. Legacy industries like automotive, aerospace, and rail are still world-class. Of course, Germany's BMW, Mercedes, and Volkswagen. France's Airbus competes directly with Boeing, who I don't have to tell you has their own issues. Europe has cross-border high-speed rail. And although green energy is sometimes frowned upon by some, parts of Europe are...
You can't dominate all the spaces.
Well, not dominate, but the fact that there isn't even a couple entries in the top 20 is a little, not concerning, but interesting,
actually doing it very well. Nearly 24% of its electricity now comes from renewables, with
Like I said, when we did the top 20 websites, if we look at the list and there's 10 American, 2 from, we saw one in Russia, one in South Korea, and then make 6, 7 European. No, I'm saying okay, America America has the majority, but Europe is holding its own. Now 0. That's a little interesting.
Denmark topping the charts. So it's really unfair to say that Europe isn't doing anything impactful. Looking beyond industry, its education is elite. Europe hosts some of the world's best universities: Oxford, Cambridge, ETH Zurich, the Sorbonne, and TU Munich. These schools consistently produce top-tier talent. Of course, though, many of those great minds
Also, I think maybe it has to do with, as I said, regulations, yes, but also with the mentality in Europe, because American is very entrepreneurial mentality. The whole chasing American dream, starting your own thing. Maybe and I'm not saying there's no entrepreneurs in Europe. Of course there is, but maybe not as many. Maybe it's not as encouraged. To maybe it's more like, because we see Europe is not so much about work. It's about like the balance, life work balance. So maybe that plays a role. Maybe just culturally they don't wanna do that.
leave towards the United States. In the US, the funding is higher and the startup culture is more aggressive. This is part of a broader brain drain, which we'll touch on later. But for those who stay in Europe, Europe actually invests heavily in its own potential. In 2023 alone, EU countries spent 381.4 billion euros on R&D. And that's not just theory. Look at CERN in Geneva, the birthplace of the World Wide Web.
Yeah, but R&D, these are big established companies. All of these startups that we're seeing, the companies, they came out of no money. Like all those companies, just somebody sitting, took a little, eventually got an investor. But maybe it's harder to get capital in Europe. Maybe the regulations are harder. There's people don't just give out money as easily as they do here for small businesses. That's that sort of thing.
Or the world's most powerful particle accelerator, or the ITER in southern France, where scientists are chasing nuclear fusion. These are serious, global-scale science projects, and they're happening in Europe. Sure, in Europe, there's political and social tensions, economic challenges, and rising crime in some areas. But that's a lot of places today. But the point stands that the quality of life remains high in comparison to many other places in the world. Healthcare is usually universal. Public transport works. Cities are designed for people, not just cars. And 4 of the world's 10 most livable cities are in Europe as of 2024. Add to that democratic value.
I'd like to see that list. That's interesting. Only 4 out of 10 is in Europe? I would think it would be like 8 in Europe. Where else? Oh.
And the world's strongest data privacy laws. And you'd think, man, this is perfect. It's the absolute perfect setup. The brains, the money, the infrastructure. And yet, when it comes to consumer tech, it's a ghost town. Yes, there are bright spots. Sweden gave us Spotify, and Germany's SAP powers enterprise software around the world. And of course, the Dutch firm ASML is arguably the most important tech company that you've never heard of. They build the machines that build
He's right about the never heard of part.
the chips that power
I look
everything.
to you.
We're talking everyone from Apple, Nvidia, the data centers that power AI,
Oh wait, what? Assembly?
most important tech company that you've never heard of. They build the machines that build the chips that power everything. We're talking
Oh no,
Oh,
the
this is
chips.
important.
No, they build the chips. I thought they talked about assembly language.
everyone from Apple, Nvidia, the data centers that power AI. Every consumer piece of technology that has a chip in it would likely not be possible without this Dutch company. But there are caveats. Spotify is barely profitable and doesn't hold a candle to those American juggernauts. SAP is huge, but it's B2B, and most people wouldn't even recognize the logo.
I've seen SAP logo, but
But
it's as he said, it's B2B. I've seen it somewhere.
I feel like
don't
I've seen it
remember.
on TV on the
Somewhere.
side.
Somewhere I've seen SAP, but that ASML, I have never heard of ASML.
ASML may be essential for the world, but it's not consumer-facing either. So there are successful tech companies, but in the context of the tech world, Europe is far from the behemoth. If we look across the globe, US consumer tech companies are just different. Apple, Google, Microsoft, Meta, Amazon. These brands are well known. They're massive. Honestly,
Are we considering Amazon a tech company or a retail company?
I just recognized Meta. Just learned it.
Oh, the new logo?
What was it before?
Well, before it was Facebook. They changed the name to Meta.
Oh,
Yeah.
now I understand. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
They
okay.
rebranded basically. But yeah, Amazon. I don't know if we can consider it tech company. Amazon is more like no, they are a tech company because they have their Amazon web servers. That's their main bread and butter. Never mind.
calling them massive is an understatement, because each of these are trillion-dollar-plus companies. 7 of these US companies, as you
Wow, $1 trillion. Back in the day when I was a kid, I had my dreams high. I would look up.
What high?
Oh, no, I wanted. I wanted to be an entrepreneur too. I look up these Forbes list, the richest company, not rich, like I guess the highest valued companies. I think the highest valued was either Walmart or one of the gas companies, and it was at like 400 billion.
Wow.
Now look at these numbers, fucking trillions, 3 trillion, 2.9 trillion, 1.79. trillion. Wow.
You can
And
still be an entrepreneur.
well, right, but I'm just saying, I'm giving you the backstory why I did that.
You can see on the screen, reached a combined market cap of 13 trillion in 2024. In contrast,
Where's
Europe's top
Walmart now?
11, including SAP,
we have
ASML,
to look
and
at the list.
Spotify, amounted to
Maybe an interesting list to check out. You know, the by net worth, the companies.
2.2 trillion. That's less than 17% of those US companies mentioned. And what's even more striking is the value of these 7 US companies, the 13 trillion, is nearly equal to the GDP of Germany, the UK, France, and Italy combined. That's just
Wow,
bonkers.
that's crazy.
Let's just forget about the US for a second. The rise of Asian nations, mainly China, South Korea, and Japan, is actually more concerning for Europe. These 3
Why?
Asian countries
Well, because basically America is already established in this market. Asia is establishing at a faster rate than Europe. So Europe is just being left behind, like big time, big time.
were always at the forefront of building incredible companies. Japan gave us iconic brands like Sony, Panasonic, and Nintendo. South Korea has LG and
Oh.
Samsung. And China?
Oh.
Well, in just the past few decades alone, they've produced BYD, Tencent,
Yeah, China has a lot of companies, but
don't know.
I think they're just, you know, within China, but they have a lot of tech. Is, you know,
Alibaba, Huawei, and ByteDance, just to name a
Oh.
few.
Alibaba.
That's where the
TikTok.
contrast with Europe
Oh,
really stands out the
yes.
most. Aside from the few names we've mentioned, there are hardly any recognizable European tech brands. Yet just a few moments ago, we looked at how the continent has all the right ingredients. So the question is, why hasn't the EU cracked the
Why
code of
haven't
consumer tech?
they?
based companies. What happened to Europe? Europe has 200 million more people than the United States. Why do
I
we not have
forgot.
any tech?
The every time, biggest concern, privacy law, privacy. They're finding the U.S. Tech companies for
Of
fines.
privacy,
Yeah,
yeah.
I want to see the update of that. I'm quite
Oh, there, I
curious.
mean, there hasn't been all day. They've been fine, period.
Technologies that Europeans developed that we need to use today to get through our life in the United States. What happened to Europe's inventiveness?
Listen, I think there's 2 reasons, and from my personal
Who is he?
experience,
I don't know.
I moved to the US when I was 16 and I never came back. I recently also became an American citizen. One thing that I've noticed is some of the best European entrepreneurs, they leave to start their companies in the US. So there's some very famous companies like Snowflake, but they were started actually by 3 French people, but it's an American company. So I think problem number 1 is the US is such an amazing country that a lot of people decide to start their companies in the US. Problem number 2 is if I'm in the US and I start a company, I get money from people who are willing to lose it, understand the risk, and I can probably
Yeah, as I said, the startup capital people, I guess they're not as willing to invest in Europe.
get a term sheet in a matter of weeks. Oh, if I try to raise money in Europe, good luck. And then after that, I'm in one country, and then I need to have a different set of regulation that I need to respect to be in the big 6. And then there's, I don't know, 30 or 40 countries in the European Union, each with their own regulation. I rather start my country in the US, start my company in the US, then you move very quickly to Canada, UK, and Australia, and then from the UK, you move to continental Europe. That's what we see.
The man you just heard is Philippe Lafont, a billionaire hedge fund manager.
Yeah, he was
Oh.
right. So, you know, as kind of I was alluding to as regulation and capital, but also what's interesting he mentioned is the different laws of every country. That has been an issue that the other guy, EU Made Simple channel, talks about how he believes that Europe should have one umbrella law. So that's also another thing to consider. A great point you had here.
He moved to the US and made his fortunes with his firm by betting rich on tech companies. What he just said are some problems that Europe is facing, but we can dig a
So
little
he's
deeper.
just a silent investor?
Seems like it. Yeah, he's the investor.
Let's start with the borders. The European Union is a political
Well, maybe he started up his own a company, sold it, and then reinvested that money.
and economic union, yes, but it's not a single market the same way the US is. Every startup in Europe has to deal with 27 different regulatory systems, 24 official
I mean,
languages.
you did the same thing too. Like you left Europe and you were internet. You wanted to start
Right?
here too.
I followed the exact same path he did. Well, it didn't turn out that way. I'm not a billionaire,
I
but
don't know you that yet.
maybe when I get his age, you know.
Yes,
and a
you have
patchwork of
plenty of
tax,
time.
labour, and data laws. According to Daniel Amramark, CFO at Dutch headquartered hospitality software, Muse, the broader challenge is that Europe, despite its economic size, still operates as a collection of individual countries, rather than a unified market in the same way the US does. This makes it harder to build companies at scale, end quote. One striking example is the early days of Uber in Europe. The app was first launched in Paris in 2011, but when the company tried to expand throughout Europe, it hit a brick wall. Hungary and Bulgaria outright banned the app. In places like Germany, France, Italy, and the Netherlands, key early Uber services were blocked because they allowed unlicensed drivers to pick up passengers. Regulators and the local taxi union didn't like that, so the backlash was fierce. Protests escalated into chaos. Streets were blocked, cars were burned, and the situation got out of hand. Eventually, the European Court of Justice ruled that countries could ban the app without needing approval from the EU. In the end, this became a textbook example of how fragmented regulations can cause roadblocks for tech companies.
Now they have a word there or no?
There's a
have
saying
no
that's going
idea.
around online: America innovates, and the EU regulates. While this is true at a glance, regulation isn't inherently bad. In fact, Europe has a history of holding the tech giants accountable.
So I think this is what just happened last week.
The EU's GDPR, or General Data Protection Regulation, set a global benchmark for data privacy. These rules were thoughtful, necessary, and in many cases ahead of their time. In 2023, Meta was fined 1.2 billion euros for transferring European Facebook users' data to the US without adequate protection.
At
This
least
is the largest
this is a
fine.
pathway. Like if you can't get into the industry, you could milk that industry.
What do you mean?
Because if they're not in the tech industry, you could stifle the tech industry infiltrating in Europe by finding them.
Yep, you're right about that.
Yeah,
And under GDPR rule,
And listen, look at this money, 1.2
it's a
billion.
lot of money for nothing.
It's a lot of money. Well, not for nothing, for breaking their law, but the law is
Yeah,
arbitrary.
but I think it would be different because if there were okay, if Europe was able to have one umbrella
Mm-hmm.
similar to the US,
Yeah.
so they would have to come to some sort of terms of privacy.
Okay.
Because they haven't, they have to, okay, I can't let them keep growing. They have to take this approach, oh, we have to slow them down in some way.
So
or form.
you're saying that the ulterior motive behind, like, oh, we care about the privacy.
Yeah, of
Oh,
course.
no, it's not
It's
really
just-
about the privacy. Let's squeeze money out of
Yes,
these American
let's get
companies.
something. I'm leaving here with something, okay?
Okay. It's, never know.
and of course, this next one affects hundreds of millions of people.
Because I'm pretty sure all of them, they have what you call it, an iPhone, Apple phone. They use Google. They use all these. Everyone uses these services. It's just who's in control is the issue, and they want to be a player. And right now, since they cannot play, they have to do something to at least build up the funding, use that money, and invest it into the companies in Europe. Now you have your a budget assigned, a funding assigned that you can use to invest if no one's interested in investing into these startup companies in Europe. There you go.
You bring a valid point. We're never gonna get to the bottom of this.
Mm-hmm.
It's private information behind closed doors. Their logic, but it's a valid point.
Because
I-
now
I
privacy
can't
is an issue.
disagree
Now
with it.
privacy is an issue.
The EU forced Apple to adopt the USB-C standard, a move that surprised many because Apple is extremely stubborn. However, there's a massive problem with the European setup. The very same regulations that protect consumers also impose massive compliance costs that smaller startups can't afford. You could argue
It's
that
kind of
these rules protect
similar like to the meats. Remember, they don't want US meats because they don't have enough regulations to give it to their European countries. European countries are able to send off to the States because they follow a guideline they're able to pass. So I think it's just similar concept but different industry. So if for example they say, oh, US can have their meats sold in the European market, but
So
they
it
would
will
have
dominate?
they would have to invest a lot of money, a lot of catch up they would have to do to get the infrastructure there, which they're not in the capacity to do so at this moment. And then they will be able to compete with European meats. But I think another issue will come up.
I see your point.
society, but at the same time, they've also unintentionally raised the bar for entry. Basically, there's a lot of rules and regulations, and the EU is cautious. And, by proxy, so are European investors. They're much less likely to take chances on bold, unproven ideas. Hampus Jacobson, a Swedish entrepreneur and the founder of the VC firm Pale Blue Dot, puts it this way to TechCrunch. Quote, I feel that few have the guts and are as visionary as US VCs. I think it's due to the fact that most EU VCs are not entrepreneurs, but pure corporate finance breadboys, or wine and dine talkers, so they don't understand risk and how to work with entrepreneurs. European VCs
And
should
I do
recruit
think European VCs, they would be on the phone call asking, "What did you do with this dollar? Other dollar, the third dollar?"
Micromanager.
Yeah, they would be They would be heavily involved
Mm.
and kind of stifle the entrepreneurial spirit of letting that person
Mhm.
create. and
Seasoned
do-
entrepreneurs. There are some exceptions, but Lord, there's a few. End quote. His words are blunt, but hit the nail on the head.
And you
European
see that
VCs tend
when you see Shark Tank with what's his
Mark Cuban.
there's Mark Cuban and Herjavec.
Robert Herjavec.
They're so different in terms of personalities to how they operate in letting the entrepreneur does its work and task.
Fair,
Completely
but their
different.
net worths are also different. To Robert Herjavec, the $1 million is he feels it much more versus Mark
Mhm.
Cuban.
But there's a reason why, because at some point they both were at zero. But because of their philosophies, you see one has more growth compared to the others.
Philosophies, but luck also too. Mark Cuban got lucky
Mm.
with the .com bubble,
Okay.
you know. So if Mark
You have
Herjavec
to take a risk. That's a risk. You don't know if it could have not panned
true
out.
to get lucky, you have to take a risk.
Yeah.
That's gambling.
I don't know. I think there has to be a video where we can look at
Kinda.
those with the highest net worth, how much risk they took. You see, what's his
There
name?
was a
Jeff
lot of risk,
Bezos.
yeah,
A lot of risk.
yeah, a lot of risk.
That had to happen
It's a
to
lot of
be
risk,
at the
yeah.
top.
The rich people
There's
are
risk.
lucky, but they did take a lot of
There's
risk.
there's
too.
risk.
to focus more on safer bets, such as B2B software, finance.
Because I would be curious to know if how many of the top are German, because German they're very tough
Oh.
type with the money. Okay, the money
Very
is not
stuff.
big.
How out of like the top richest people, top 100 richest
Yes,
people, how many
and
Germans?
understand the personality types too.
Germans catching strays now? Not strays, it's just different person. Interesting.
I'm not mad at it. I understand it, but
That's an interesting point you raised. I would like to see like how many out of the top, not maybe top 100, maybe like a top 1,000 richest
Yeah.
people. Well, how many are Germans? That would be an interesting thing to. Once again, how many is a good amount though? Because Germany has only so few people. So like compare.
I would just be curious to know top 10.
Let me see if I can look it up.
or health tech.
The
It
same way
explains
they
why
did the
Europe's best
list
companies,
here
like SAP and
for how many of the websites are American, European, and South in Asian. You can find something like this too.
ASML are enterprise focused and not consumer facing. You can see this pattern in the kind of ventures that pop up. In 2025, there's approximately 35,000 EU startups, and the majority of them
So Germany has in 2025 they have 171 billionaire.
171 billionaire.
Yeah.
Like, but when we say billionaire, did they make? Is it one like? Same like Selena Gomez billionaire, or
any
like billionaire like in the the 3-digit billion.
Does it matter?
Yeah. Because there's this meme online. There's people who say, "Oh, I make 6 figures," but they can only make 100,000, and that's not the same as someone who's doing 500,000.
Okay, so in America,
that's not different.
America is number one with total. Okay, so I guess we can do by total net worth of the billionaires. Maybe that's that's America's number one with 6.8 trillion.
What?
Okay, so America is number one, has 902 billionaires
Whoa!
With-
Really?
with 6.8 trillion dollars. Their total net worth. So if all
okay.
902 billionaires, put their chips on the table, that table would be worth 6.8 trillion dollars. That's more
That's a
than a lot
lot.
of countries' GDPs
That's a
combined.
lot.
China is number two with
I wonder
450.
if he says American citizen now. Is he
Well,
American or French?
yeah. Total billionaires in China 450 with
Next is China.
yes with
Oh.
well they have shitload of people. Total net worth 1.7 trillion. Third is India with 205 billionaires.
My issue with China is transparency.
China is 205 billionaires. Total net worth is 941 billion. And number four is Germany. 171 billionaire with 793 billion dollars total net worth. And the richest person, since you want to know,
Yeah.
it's Dieter Schwartz. And
What does he do?
I don't know, but he has 41 billion.
So I know what they're doing now. They're pretending not to have the money. They have it.
Germany is up there
Mm-hmm.
compared to Russia's fifth, Then is Canada, Italy, Hong Kong, and
Canada, Italy.
wow, Hong Kong is impressive because Hong Kong is a tiny ass. I
Mm-hmm.
guess all the rich people just move there and claim residency. Hong
Mm.
Kong, Brazil, and UK.
Wow. So we have a country from South America.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Richest Canadian is Chinese. Champagne Zhao.
Wow.
Okay.
That was so interesting.
So Germany didn't deserve your strays.
No, but okay, but then I
I
was just
get you. I'm
saying,
just kidding. I
yeah.
get what the point you were trying to
Mhm.
make.
Them are
They're
focused on
pretending
AI,
not to got it. They
fintech,
got it.
and sustainability. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it leaves a massive gap for the consumer tech sector. In Silicon Valley, it's a different story. It's high risk, high reward. It's the kind of environment where failure is almost seen as a badge of honor. Here's Sundar Pichai, Google's CEO, on the matter.
I don't know if it's seen as a badge of honor, but more so as a, life goes on type of thing.
Starting up a company and even having failed, you can wear it like a badge of honor, right? And I think that's important. Culturally, risk is rewarded. I remember when I started working at Google, if I went and people were discussing ideas, the other people who heard the ideas try to build on those ideas. They encourage you.
This is really
it's a culture
big
of-
during the American Dream era. Like, you want the American Dream, American Dream.
This
American
is the
dream.
American dream.
Yeah,
Literally, what we're
yeah.
talking about in this
But-
video is all these companies started because of American dream.
But I think that's why they're trying to convert that. Okay, this is it's not just limited to it being an American dream.
Well, I'm sure Europe will want to have a European dream too.
Yeah, yeah.
Optimism. It's a culture of risk taking, and I think that's really important. So.
In contrast, the EU is very cautious, and the numbers show it. A 2020 report showed that European startups get 54% less funding than their US counterparts as they mature. The report
Wow.
also highlights that just 0.5% of them manage to scale at all, and it's not for a lack of ambition. European founders are innovative, but the money just isn't following the ideas. In 2024, American and Canadian startups brought in over $184 billion.
So
That's almost three
from what
times
I
more.
gather, you have to go to Europe and find an idea and bring it here.
Bring it back here.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Not finding it, but you go to Europe, you can get the education, the idea, whatever. But if you want to start a business, you come back here.
Than the whole of the EU. When you look at venture capital versus GDP, the disparity is clear. In the last decade, the US averaged 0.7% of GDP in VC funding. That's about 350% more than the EU at 0.2%. So it's clear here, less funding and more caution. When you put all of these factors together, you start to see why so many brilliant European engineers are leaving the continent. This is the broader brain drain issue that I mentioned earlier. Over the past decade, the percentage of EU science graduates staying overseas jumped from 49% to 73%. That's massive. And this kind of brain drain causes a talent shortage. In fact, according to the previous report, 63% of high-growth startups in Europe want to hire more skilled workers, but nearly a third can't find the right people. The applicants often lack the experience, skill set, or the mindset to succeed. In short, there's not enough experts, and
Mindset to succeed. That's an interesting point. Because you have to work hard, you might have to work overtime. That doesn't align with the European
But I feel
siesta
like
policy.
for you in the East, I feel like it does.
Oh no, in the East, yeah. Why do you think Lithuania is like one of EU's tech hub? Because of that. Lithuania is growing because of tech industry. Lithuania has a huge tech industry right now.
the people that you need to build global consumer-facing tech just aren't enough
But they're
in the
not
EU.
paying the people either.
They are
That's
not.
the-
We
that's the
did see the
problem.
video. They
That's the-
are
I
not
understood
paying.
that.
But also that's why the hub is there, because you can get a good quality work for low
Oh.
price.
Oh.
It's like
No, I need to tell my people.
Lithuania is
that
like
are
the China
support.
of Europe.
It's a tough position to be in, but it's not game over yet. Europe may have missed
Not in terms of quality, in terms of prices.
the first wave of the digital revolution in the 21st century. It didn't invent the iPhone,
Okay.
the search engine,
You're
or
silly.
the attention economy. So what now for them? Some say that Europe should not try to clone Silicon Valley. Instead, they should do something more European. So what does this look like? Well, in 2022, they launched the European Chips Act. It was a €43 billion investment to boost semiconductor production and reduce dependence on the US and Asian suppliers. Right now, over 90% of the world's most advanced
That's cute, but I think the core of the issue is the startups. Like the big companies, the fact that you give more money to the big companies to produce more stuff, that's cute. But
That's the very say.
yeah, but exactly, that's very safe. Those are established companies. They know what they're doing. The whole idea of
They're afraid
tech
to lose
is,
money.
yeah, you have to give it to random people on this. Okay, not random, but people who have ideas. Just give them money to, fuck it, do it.
chips come from Taiwan. So Europe is playing the long game by investing in its own chip manufacturing. But it's definitely not easy. Even American giants like Intel are struggling to compete making their own chips without the help of Taiwan. So we'll keep an eye on how Europe goes with this venture. On the regulatory front, they launched the Digital Markets Act in 2023. This act targets the so-called gatekeeper platforms like Google, Apple, and Meta. The goal is to force them to open up their platforms and stop favouring their own products in search results. Perhaps the EU is slowly recognising that while it may not have the
And
tech
maybe they
giants,
will accomplish this because you see how McDonald's and all the food chains that are from the US in Europe, they have to operate with different standards because they have to comply
Well,
in
they
order
will,
to
they will
operate.
accomplish it, yeah, or withdraw.
it does have something else: the power to set global norms. Columbia law professor Anu Branford calls this the Brussels effect, named after the EU's political capital, Brussels. It refers to how European regulations often end up becoming the default standard worldwide purely because of their influence. Like it or not, because it's easier than building different products or services for different regions.
That does also make sense. So for this digital marketing law, privacy law, you know, for the companies, instead, okay, we have to do one mode for European phones, another for American phones. It's like, fuck it, just apply European to all because it's easier. Makes sense.
In short, Europe may not control the platforms, but it can control the rules.
The European Union has ordered Apple and Facebook parent Meta to pay combined fines of 700 million euros, the first punitive acts taken under the Digital Markets Act, legislation
I remember this guy. We saw him in a video once.
that's designed to curb the power of big tech.
These measures have nothing to do with trade policy. It's European law, and European law has to be enforced. Whatever American government there is, whatever other governments may think about it, it's in the interest of open markets, and from these open markets, also American companies will flourish and will enjoy the benefits of.
A great example of the EU's regulatory reach is playing out right now with artificial intelligence. In 2024, they passed the AI Act, the world's first comprehensive artificial intelligence law. It sets strict requirements for safety, transparency, and accountability. Once again, the EU is betting that companies will adopt its rules. But whether this benefits users or just turns out to be another regulatory drag remains to be seen. But among all of this, there's some real genuine innovation. For example, Estonia, a tiny Baltic country, had made all of its government services 100% digitized as of 2024. Now citizens can vote online, pay taxes in minutes, and even start a business from abroad. Meanwhile, France has quietly
The voting online, I don't know. This is still, for me, I feel like that's susceptible to, you know, cyber attacks. I don't know. So it's a big thing. I can see, like, you know, Russian having their hackers interfere into the election, try to. Okay, my English is whatever.
It's okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Voting online is, I don't know.
built the third largest startup ecosystem in Europe. Backed by state funding,
Like, obviously, I like the idea. It's admirable. But in terms of security,
digital health platforms are growing in numbers. Startups
You
like
know what they
Doctor
can do? They can have a person vote online, and then the country can pay like notaries to verify those votes.
yeah, but the whole, you know, if votes are free, if you start,
No, it's free, but
No,
the notary, the government will have to still have to have people. They pay people for that to do the polls, the pollings, the whole the poll stations.
well, I hope the government figured it out. You know,
and Alan are reshaping how people access healthcare. Another app, Monospace Sante, built a national platform to securely store and share medical records. Whatever the state of things right now, we can't deny Europe's influence. In the 18th and 19th centuries, they led the world through the Industrial Revolution. In the 20th century, it rebuilt from 2 bloody wars and helped define modern democracy and prosperity. But they face a new challenge now. So the question is, in a world defined by technology, is it enough to simply just regulate the future? Or must you build it too? Let us know what you think. Would you like to see the EU have more of a
all right, cool, interesting video.
Can you imagine EU catching up in terms of tech?
Catching up, no. Making a dent, yes. I think they can make a dent in terms of world tech. Catching up to America, oof, we got a head start here. I don't know if.
Yeah, but things can always turn. Sometimes I always feel like, oh, everything has been invented. Like there's nothing new that's gonna come out, and then boom, the greatest new invention.
Yeah, but this would require not just one invention, but like, you know, to catch up. It's a lot of inventions. Yeah, Europe, someone in Europe might discover the next big thing that becomes
Yeah.
the biggest thing in the world. Yes,
Yeah.
but one is not enough. You would have to discover
Mm.
like 20, 30, 40, 50
Mhm.
biggest things in the world
30, 40.
to compete with the States, you know.
Because I felt like, okay, we had like Facebook came and then Instagram a little bit after. Then we have like all these apps that popped
Yeah.
up. Mm.
All American.
Yeah, but if they were to do that
Except
in
for
Europe.
Spotify.
Mm-hmm. Okay. They're not making money. I don't understand that.
Well, the startups usually don't make money.
No, Spotify isn't
Yeah,
that
they
from a
don't. They
startup?
don't. They don't
It's
make money. It's about the growth. You keep pouring money in with the hopes at some point you're gonna make money.
Spotify.
Listen, jokes aside, that's what happened with Amazon. They were not profitable for like 20 years, and guess what? On the
Oh,
21st or whatever,
that's
they turned
crazy.
profit. They turned profit, but that profit was profiting.
You really have to have a certain personality to do this.
Yeah.
Guys, of course, let us know your thoughts. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Join the Discord. And as always, share as much kindness as possible.